Hi, I'm RC Jim. This is the second video in our series on this repair of the Super Air. Originally a nitro plane, converted to electric, smashed to bits, and hey, it's coming together really well. So in this video, we show you how we get up to this point here. And of course, there'll be more videos to follow as we work through the project step by step. We show you a lot of detail. So have a look, and I trust that you'll find some helpful tips, and yeah, just very interesting to see it all come together. Well, we're getting ready to epoxy up the little joiner piece in the middle here. Of course, this side is already connected onto that panel, and I'm debating about whether to super glue this onto this side, but I certainly want to epoxy this join over here. So I've mixed up a little bit of epoxy here, and we'll put a whole bunch of it on there. Okay. So we'll put at least some on over here. So I'm putting it into these places that are kind of interior-like. And I think I'm going to use the CA on the outside of it to hold it in place, because the epoxy will not tend to do that straight away. But where I want the join to be the strongest, I'll use it. And obviously we will be reinforcing this along the way. Okay, so that gives us some of the basics. This bit over here, and that's where that goes. Get these guys into here. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to be a bit like a dentist. You know, the dentists nowadays, they use glue to hold stuff in place. So Jim the plane doctor has turned to Jim the plane dentist to glue it together. Okay, as usual, I want to have some baking paper to help hold things. And speaking of holding things, how do you like my box idea here? I wanted to hold this up to where I could get at everything. Okay. Now, what is it about this that's not going into place? I'm not getting this to fit in place. I was thinking it was fitting in there before. I think some of that epoxy in there was just holding it out, so I'm squeezing it in really tight along this bulkhead here. And that seems to be bringing it in a lot closer. Oops, that's not the spot. Well, actually, I guess I do have two spots, don't I? I got that spot, and I got this spot. significant gap there for some reason. Okay, we'll get another clamp for that bit. Can't seem to do much about this little gap down here. So I guess we'll try some medium CA to see if we can fill the gap. While we're waiting for that to solidify, I did try buying some stuff that says it removes adhesive and glue. Didn't work any better than the other stuff. So there's two brands at the hardware store, and I'll try the other one. But just looking at this, turns out this one is just mostly acetone, and it doesn't work terribly great. So we'll see what else we can find. So we now have epoxied this in. We've got this glued down the side here. That's nice and solid. Okay, I've noted that this bulkhead here is broken, and so I want to put that together. It's also showing me my 1 or 2 millimeters that I got it off a little bit in terms of putting it back together. But anyway, not a big deal. We're going to put this in there, and I'm going to do this before I do anything else. I kind of needed to have that in first to make sure I had that clamped down really good. And just looking at it, I can see that this piece here, that this was fastened to this part that it got busted out on the side, and I can see where it's got a little bit of a gap there. So I'm going to fill that with some CA, and then we may do a little bit more with epoxy after that. So let's start out with a thin. Get as much in there as we can, and then if we have to, we'll add some thick. And just clamp that together a bit. Okay, that's looking much better now. So we got that. We'll do this, but I want to get this in before much of anything else. Got little bits of glue on the outside, and as much as possible we want to be doing our new gluing directly onto the wood. And I can see how easily this stuff that they've got on there comes off. So whatever they used before isn't terribly tough. It's certainly not epoxy. I'm not sure what it is. This side is better. You can see where it's actually busted off the wood. I'm still doing my best to, where it's busted off the wood, there was still a layer of glue between this plywood piece and the wood that was stuck to it. And I want to get right down to the actual plywood piece. The glue can adhere directly to what we got. Okay, that cleaned up pretty nicely. This doesn't look too bad inside there. Not a lot we can do with that regardless. Okay, so we're going to mix up some glue. Super strength epoxy adhesive. That sounds like a good solution. It's nice when the two parts have slightly different color. Helps you know better when you got it mixed really good. Okay, so I'm putting it into the slots on the plane first. Okay, now we stick our platform in there. Hold it apart, try to get it to go straight into the slot without scraping too much off. Okay, so that's got glue in the slots. I'm just going to add a little bit onto the part between the slots. I'm just going to clear off some of the excess. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now, yeah, I guess I could use a clamp still. Now for this guy back here, a little bit of balsa across there. It's always good to hang on to scraps of balsa for times like this. 67. Okay, so just a little panel to go there. And we'll sand that off just a tiny bit to get it the right length. Still has some of this epoxy left, so I'm going to use that on here. Okay. Now that's going to go in here like this. And then we need to clamp that on there. I've decided to do this piece separate from the top pieces here. I might have to carve a little bit off there, but I want to make sure that this is really clamped on there good. So I'm just cutting a bit of balsa, and I'll take some tape. So I'm going to tape this piece of balsa onto the clamp. And then I know for sure that it's got enough reach to get past that thing there, and it's clamping on the actual part that I want clamped. I'll put that on here. Okay, that's still not quite all the way there. What I want in here is just something that this bit I can put a little pressure on it, and it isn't quite in all of the way. So I'm just creating, oops, that's too much. So I might just try putting some tension on this with a rubber band. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to tie a bit of rope down here. It's important to try and get the pieces that you're gluing as tightly together, a form of clamping of some sort, to hold it snugly in place with the two pieces of material together. To get the strongest sort of join out of it. Okay, so that's now pulling that nicely. If I push, it doesn't move at all. So I got clamp there, and some pressure put on it there in a spot where I can't get a clamp in. So that's going to work out fine for that. Okay, so that's in place. I'd like to verify that it's down all of the way. So I'm just pushing with my fingernail and just making sure that piece of wood that I went in there that didn't get cocked one way or the other. I can see it along here and it looks pretty straight, but I can actually feel it here. And we want it even with this top piece, and well, sorry, even with the bottom piece so that the top is proud over top. So it looks like it's in the right position. So that's that one. Now let's consider this guy back here. Okay. I'm just checking this here, just looking at it. It looked to me like it's cockeyed, and the basic thing is that this panel down here on the bottom is bowed in slightly. That's square going down that way. Going down this way, it's square halfway down, and then at the very bottom I've got maybe a millimeter, something like that. So I'll give attention to that when we get to securing the bottom, but it's not enough off to bother anything. But just eyeballing it, I can see the difference. I probably would have done well to do something when I put this in to try and correct that a tiny bit. I'm not quite sure how. That should be governed by these bulkheads that are in here, but we didn't have much of anything here. And this one's way back there, so there's not a lot to govern it in this area here. Now, as I'm concerned about these sides potentially being kinked one way or the other, I've cut these two little pieces of plywood to be just the right width to be able to go in there. That one is looking very good. This one, which way does it go? That way, I think. That way or that way. I tried both. One is a couple millimeters wider than the other. Okay. Am I coming back a little bit? Okay, so those are looking quite good. So that's just going to help hold those sides straight as this panel solidifies in the middle. You know, just trying to keep everything square. Okay, and that's all happening. That's happening. Now we're focusing on this up here. Next. So the first thing we need to do, we got all this rubbish in here that's getting in the way of a decent join. The wing is going to come onto the back of it, so I can't add much. Well, certainly not above where the wing comes to here. Down below that I can. But up here at the top, it needs to be reinforced on this side. So I want to clean up this garbage back here and then put in a bit of a reinforcing bit up there. And that can come all the way up to the panel that we put in here for the landing gear. Well, this isn't a Dremel, but I got thinking, yeah, that might get in there, and we'll give it a try. Well, having used the power tool on there, I'm now going to try and use a file to clean it up a little bit. Also, I'm thinking that where we got these rough edges and stuff, before I glue anything in there, I'm going to cut a straight line here and put in a panel there and be able to glue all of that stuff together at the same time. We also got a bulkhead here that needs to get rebuilt up to there. So a few bit of reconstructive things that still happen up here. Well, let's get the clamps off and see how things are. Okay. Okay, that. Okay, broke off a little bit of balsa there. Of course, going across here, there's just no strength at all to that. Kind of questionable as to, I guess it does provide a little bit of torsional rigidity. It's certainly not very strong. dependent upon the plywood underneath, and the plywood underneath has got vertical grain on the outsides. They have lengthwise grain inside, but anyway. Okay, so we got a little bit of cleaning up to do from our epoxy that came out there, but the panel is positioned appropriately. That's going to give it a lot of strength across there. Of course, we're trying to keep this beefed up in here for our landing gear supports. These little guys helped keep everything square, so that's good. That panel is really solid in there. That's going to give it a lot of rigidity in that area. So that's good. Okay, so we need to think about working on this area here and this bit here. Cleaning up that a bit. My sandpaper comes up to the edge of this, so that if I want to sand against something where I don't want to sand the side, I can use that bit. Okay, that's looking very nice. So I need to decide whether I'm going to use balsa in here. So anyway, the question is, what sort of strength do we need in here? I guess, we might assume that it's equal. And of course, we'll be cutting out an equivalent hole for that there. I think I do want to use plywood, because I think that's going to be stronger overall. And we do also have to have strength across this way, so the plywood has got the strength in two directions. I think something like that, and I'll make it just a smidge wider than this, and then probably a smidge longer as well. Say a centimeter longer, 2 millimeters wider. The next thing we're wanting to do is to get the firewall in place, like so. And thinking about this being right side up like this. The original holes for the nitro engine are these big ones out here. You can see how they're offset off to the left. And that's because they've given a right offset on the engine as far as tilting it to the right to counteract the torque effect, or so-called torque effect, the impact upon the rudder. So what I'd previously had in here was an electric motor with these mounting holes on it, and I just simply put it straight in the middle. But what I'm going to do this time, first off, I'm going to go with a slightly smaller motor. I had a 6S and a great big whopping Cobra motor in this thing, and I want to go lighter weight and a little bit smaller. I'm going to go ahead and try to match the sort of offset that they would have had. So I'm going to put some holes just inside of those ones to utilize for mounting the motor. And in selecting the motor, I've decided on a Dual Sky Eco 3520 1020 kV. Okay, and the reason why I want the 1020 kV is that as you think about the height of this plane, the distance off the ground, okay, the landing gear goes right in here, and this landing gear is, let's do it in inches. Where we got inches? Here's some inches. Okay, the landing gear, if I sight down from the, let's see, the bottom, we're talking about just over 5.5 inches, not 5 3/4 inches, 5 5/8. So let's say a little over 5.5 inches from there. And let's say that's even with the bottom of that. Might be a little bit below. And let's say the motor's about in the middle, so another 2 inches. So I've got about 7.5 inches clearance for a prop on one side. Okay, so let's say we want an inch off the ground for the prop. And certainly we need at least that. So 7.5, 6.5. I could go to a 13-inch prop at the maximum. Okay. So with this 3520 with a 1020 kV, either 11 or 12-inch prop will do the job. And with a 12-inch prop, I can get nearly 4 kilos of thrust out of it. Given that I'm targeting about a 3-kilo plane, that is going to be wonderful to have that kind of power. And by going to the lower KVs, it does that for me. And that's with a 4S battery. So I'm going from a 6S down to a 4S, and I'm delivering pretty similar thrust. You know, it was, you know, up in that area that I had before. But before I had a lower KV, and I had to get as big of a prop as I possibly could on there. So going with a higher KV motor gives us a much more suitable outcome as you compare to, say, having a 46 nitro motor on there. So with that, I then look up the dimensions, and I see I need basically 49 millimeters across on the motor mount. And so that's what I'll work on in setting this up. And I'll go ahead, in order to do this nice and precise, I'll do this while this is still off the plane. And then after I've got the holes in there ready to go, then we will epoxy this in place. You can see I've already removed the blind nuts off of the back. And we'll have a few extra holes in there, but I think it's still going to be good and solid. So we need to mark out. We just simply can go diagonal across each of these here, and we'll double check after we get it in there, or get the things marked, that everything appears to be square and all of that. But given that the other holes were in there right, this would be an easy way to mark out where our new ones are. Okay, now we now want 49, and these old ones, when you're measuring the distance center to center for holes, probably the most precise way to do it is go from the far edge to the far edge. So that's 65 center to center. I want 49. So 16, that's 8 on each side. Okay, 8 from the center is here. Okay, 49. 49. Okay, those all look good. And yeah, it's going to be pretty square. Yeah, I don't have really anything good to work off of as far as using my square on there. I can just have a look and see what that gives me. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Just to verify that they are the right distance apart. 34.5, 34.5, so I'd say those marks are good. So we're going to put this on the drill press. Since we got this stuff that's dodgy down here, we'll have a piece of wood that fits into the middle there to support it while we drill it. And let's see, the holes. 4.5 mil diameter, so M4 holes. Well, M4 is going to be the bolt, and it'll be blind bolts. Actually, that's what we had on here before. So we'll measure those to see what size they are. Okay, got M4 bolt. That fits into the blind nut. Zero out my scale and measure the diameter. 4.95, so I want a 5 millimeter hole. Many of you may already be familiar with this tool, but in being able to get these holes precisely where you want them, this is a great thing to be able to do that. It's a sort of thing that compresses for a period of time, and then it sort of bangs to allows you to mark a hole without having to hit the thing with a hammer. So you can get the thing very precisely under your crosshairs. Just push straight down and bang, puts a nice hole in there to center your drill bit. Okay, so I got 4 spots marked. It'll be real easy to follow with the drill. Yep, that'll be very precise. I'm going to go ahead and whack these blind nuts in place. It allows me to have a look at where the prongs are going to go in. Get some decent meat underneath the things there. So we make sure we're on the back side. So it goes in like this. That's definitely the back. Having put in the blind nuts, I now want to just check to make sure that they're in reasonably perpendicular. That can be altered, you know, when you put the bolt in there, you can push it one way or the other. But as you're fishing a bolt in there, trying to install a motor mount, it can be rather difficult. Difficult with that one, just getting it started. But yeah, it can be difficult to get them started if they're not straight. This one's given me heaps of problems anyway. It's always good to sort out as much of this as you can while you got good access to everything. Oh, there we go. Just making sure in this one it's going in pretty tight. I want to make sure that it's actually the right size, and I think what's making it tight is the fact that I used thread locker on it earlier. Yes, that threads in fine. So we have a look. You know, you could use a square if you want, but probably close enough is good enough as far as the eyeballs are concerned. And if need be, what you do is you give a whack on the side that needs to go in on the back side there. This is also helping to ensure that you've got reasonably clear threads that you can work with when you go to install the motor when it's in the plane. Later on they may go in a little bit further when they get tightened down. But the key thing that we're doing here is just making sure that you're going to be able to get them threaded into place. The motor is a smaller diameter than the bolt holes, so that should be fine. So it's going to fit in there with no problem at all. And by putting them in this orientation, we got more clearance from the sides if we have to get in on an angle or something, as compared to the way I did it before, where we had some quite close to the sides. So the next thing that we're doing is to get this in place. We've got this bit here that seems to be quite solid. This part here came off quite easily, and actually before I get that in there, I'm going to sand that up a bit to make sure we've got some good bare wood to glue onto. And then we're going to do a trial fit. Then if all looks good, we'll mix up some epoxy and get that in place. And then we'll add reinforcing on the back of it. So we've now cleaned up the edges nicely all around. Got some good wood to be able to glue onto all around the edges. Sanded on this side as well. Even got into there. So now try a trial fit. See how she fits. Okay, that looks pretty good. A little bit of a gap up here. Where we've got the slot in the side here, I'm just marking on the edge of that to see if we're getting into there. Okay, that got in that time. Yeah, and into there. Very good. Okay. So that's how we want to do all of that. So we're going to mix up some epoxy, and that's ready to get glued. Okay, so we've got the glue all spread around nicely. I put it onto there, onto the plane as well. And now let's fit it in place. Good. Now, just where it's seeped out at the bottom, we're just spreading it around. Okay, that's going to be a nice solid joint, I believe. We'll add in a little piece in there. So we can do that now. Don't have any diagonal pieces, so we're just kind of carving down on one. No need to have all of the extra balsa where it's not actually providing strength. Okay. Looks good. Now we got a little bit of a dimple that we need to put in it. Just above there on this side. Got a little bit that's sticking out on the other bit from the original stuff that we need to provide clearance for. And that looks okay. That's halfway decent. Use all kinds of different things to clamp. Obviously you need to be careful with using vice grips. Okay, I've got the top part of it, and now something for the bottom part. Could just pin it in place. Maybe that's what I'll do. We now need to fill in this bit of a gap here. So I got this piece of balsa that's about the right size. We're coming to the inside of the outside skin, so I get that corner lined up there. Get it pretty square. This is going to be pretty well right on the line to there. Be coming out to here. Okay, over here I'll mark just where the outside comes to, and then I realize I'll have to give it a little bit less than that. Okay, and that's going to come back to, let's plan on cutting that off a little bit. So to there. So I'm marking both pieces as to how long it's going to be. Okay. Okay, so we're going to leave a bit of a gap there. We're assuming the outside is right. And how long is this going to be to here? So I'll take it right from the corner. I'll come up a little bit tighter, just because you can always take more off, but you can't take less off. And then that'll be coming off square there. And this is just going to be a short little bit. Be that kind of width. But then it's going to come out to there. That's what we had to give it enough to do that. Give it about 2 mils or 2 centimeters to about here. Okay, we got that cut off. Okay, so that's going like this. Comes back to here. And we've got this bit coming across. So then, from here, let's go ahead and make it 20 mils. 20 mils in the middle. Okay, and the angle of that is going to be square to the world. So that's its position out here. So let's go back in that way. Okay, this edge is still square here. So this is going to go like that. Okay, and this is just 7.5 mil. Okay, this here is marking it right there. Goes that away. Okay, we need some radiuses, so how about a circle template? This will work. And a little bit tighter, but it'll be all right. Okay, so that's what we want to cut out. Okay. Balsa is real easy to split, so you always want to think about what you're doing with it. This bit here I expect will be a little bit wide, and we'll come back and redo it. Let's see, I already did that. You can always sand these bits if they, like the radiuses, if they're a little bit shallow. And this is where one spot where we want to be real careful about a split, so we're going to pull back from this area rather than go the other way and possibly split the whole piece right off. Okay, we have a look at the back to see what's what, and it's all looking pretty good. So that's looking very good. Got this a bit wide, and it's good that I did because it's not exactly in the middle. There's a little bit of sanding on that side, and well, we've demonstrated how easy it is to split stuff off. In this particular case, we're just going to glue it back on because that's really got no strength in that direction anyway. Okay, now we've got this thing to cut here. Okay, so we'll leave in the pencil mark. And down here, and we leave in the pencil mark. Okay, something to push against. Okay, there we go. a little bit of glue sticking out here. That was glued together there. We'll be reinforcing that from the other side. Let's have a look here. Okay, that's looking mighty good. Okay, so this we're going to zap in place. Instead of tacking it in place in various spots, and then we'll go back and get some of the joins. Looks to me like there's a little bit of a gap in there. So these are zap a gap. Okay, now we need to be thinking about reinforcing this bit. So we've got this thing to cut out, and we'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, unfortunately my battery on the camera quit just as I was in the process of doing this. So what I did while battery was charging up, I got the little panel cut out this little bit out of that plywood panel that's in there. So it's got a hole that matches the other hole. Put epoxy all over it, put it in there, have the baking paper over top of it, clamp the top. Then I've got two paper clip type clips inside there. I guess I can pick that up and show you. Okay, so we've got two paper clips inside there that are clamping that together. Now let's get these clamps off and see what we've got underneath here. Good. Clearly it's filled in nicely in there. Hard to tell in here. Down there at the hole it's definitely up against it, so I think it's just up here at the top where there's a little bit of a gap there. But yeah, I think that's going to help support that very well. We will sand it off to get it level with where it was originally, and that's going to be good. And we got this bit up here. This is what happens when you're looking for a normal drawing pin and you find a safety pin before you find the drawing pin. Okay, that's all looking very good and very solid. Yeah, I'm going to be pleased with that. Okay, so now we got a bulkhead to build in here. And we've got to cut down these sides. Now on these sides, my original thought was to cut down to this defined spot here and make a piece for both sides that are identical. But really the key thing is that what's identical on both sides is the line from the top of this down to the top of that one there. And what we have to do down here can be different on each side. So let's work out what sort of thickness we need. It appears to be about 4 mil. So I think I'll just use a single 4 mil piece of balsa if I've got that. And we'll take off this stick-on hooks. And having pulled off something sticky, that allows me to introduce Eco Concepts graffiti remover. Now I tried this goof off stuff, and that's just basically acetone, and it didn't work any different than my wax and grease remover. I haven't looked at that to see whether that's acetone or not. But anyway, this one, they don't tell you what it is, but it actually works better. Cutting this off is going to be interesting. Okay, I suppose this would have been easier to cut off without that new piece glued in. Okay, so we will endeavor to go perpendicular to the firewall out to here. It's kind of hard to get it terribly precise, but we'll do as close as we can. And then from there to here, we'll come up on an angle. This will allow some support for that as well, so we'll go to the middle. Okay, so that's a more complex shape, and I think we can manage to match that okay. Marking clearly where we're going to stop with a cut. The first bit that you score is especially important. And then after that, you want to protect your fingers just in case the knife comes through. That wasn't too good. Okay, this is a place to be careful of with regard to splitting the wood. So before I try to get that all the way down, I'm going to make sure we got a way for the wood to be able to be relieved coming out, which will tend to reduce the likelihood of a split. Good bit of glue and epoxy right on the top, which is very tough. I use good stuff for this one. For now, I'll just provide a way of relief by cutting into the balsa adjacent to that, so that's got that loose. I can clean it up afterwards. So now, since this is free all the way out to here, we can be a little bit more aggressive in what we do right in here without fearing that we're going to split it out that way. Okay, and again here, I'm just going to cut into the balsa to get the piece out of there. And then the glue we can clean up later. Okay. So let's start with the easy one first. With this one, we want one side. Where are we coming to? I guess we're going over top of that, 135. So this one is 136. 136. And going right down the middle, 23, let's say. So 136, 135, 23. Neither of those are right angles. So that's what we need to make for that. And we're also going to need to flatten this out. I'll have a look at how square this thing is. Extremely square. And not extremely square. So according to that, this side needs to go down a bit. But that's going to be a problem as far as the wing goes. Yeah, this is definitely high on this side. I'm looking at the bottom of the holes here, and I can see I got a bigger gap here than over there. Pretty significant too. Now I can correct that using the bit on the back and maybe even some fill on this side. It's hard to know right now. It seemed like that'd have to be right. Looks like that piece is together. This one over here got more disintegrated, so it's harder to tell whether that's all the way in or not. But my guess is that that hole is right, and this one has gotten bounced up a bit. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to assume that this one is right. I'll just get my wing out and just sort of have a look. Unfortunately, without putting a hole in there, I can't really check. See if we can ascertain anything from putting this in place. Okay, that's that side. I'd say that side needs to go down, and this side is even worse. Well, needless to say, the panel going from here up to there isn't critical as far as locating the wing. What's critical is the holes that are going to be in here, and then how it's cut out around there. Cut out around there hasn't changed, so the holes ought to be right. I note that the hole is a lot bigger in there than what these pegs are that are coming out of the wing, so we will be tightening up on those. But hopefully we'll do it in a way that gets this wing nice and snug up against the plane. So in the meantime, we'll just leave that as it is, and we'll come up to that. What we do want to do is I'd like to put a little bit of an angle on that so that this panel that sits on top of that can be flush on that. So for that one, come all the way back and all the way to the front of it, 138. So 138 is what we're going to do by 81 inside 79. Oh, I got to do this thing too. Okay, so we've got this bulkhead here that we need to complete. And say 82, it's a little bit less than 82, but we'll start out shooting for 82 across. Okay, and we'll only be coming down about 40, and the sides will be about 11, yeah, say 11 on each side. So then the question becomes, where do we want this hole to come up to here? Okay, it's definitely going to end up being angled up because we need more than, than next to nothing there. So that means it's going to have an angle that way, which isn't going to be terrible as far as the battery is concerned. And as far as the battery is concerned, we might even have something that we can take out that allows the ESC to be underneath and the battery to be a little bit higher. In my stash of balsa, I wasn't able to find something to suit that particular thing. So I got this super light plywood here. This is 0.05 inch or 1.86 millimeter thick plywood. And I was playing around trying to think of what size hole to cut in it, because I'll cut some holes in it to make it lighter. I think I'll go with a larger hole, and I think that's going to still provide plenty of strength. Of course, it's going to get covered with the covering. So that's what we're going to use. In cutting this plywood, I put it on the radial arm saw, and I first off cut out the rectangle with the wider dimension at the one end. Then I know I want to come in 1 millimeter on each of these. So with it sitting in the saw on the thing, I got the blade to where it was just touching there, and then I tilted it, just eyeballing down on this end to get it about 1 millimeter. And then I put it over to the other side and it did the same thing. Had it got it to where the blade is just, the blade running. Just move it up to where I can just start to hear it zinging on that. Okay, then getting the saw back out of the way, and then just leaving this end exactly where it is, just rotating it that way, sighting here and estimating 1 millimeter. So I did that, and as I then get it lined up here, and we get both of these where they're lined up there. Okay, and holding it there, I then look at this. This one is actually needs to come back towards me. It's got a gap, and that one, it's off that way, so something isn't exactly square, kind of like the way they build houses. So I then say, okay, we'll fudge it a bit. We'll bring this one up to where it matches. Okay, and it's just hardly a hairbreadth up on that one, and maybe a tiny bit back on this one. Okay, and on this one, I've put that little mark there where I think that's lined up. This is thicker here than what it is back there. So, yeah, I can see if I look at that there, I can kind of see where it is here. And so if I get it here again, get this lined up there, look at that. Yeah, my little mark there is right where I want to be. So now I'm going to put it in the radial arm saw up against the fence. I'm going to then move it just a little bit to the side to, I'll sight where this is first, and then when I move it, I'll get that little mark where that was, and hopefully that's going to do it. That makes sense? Okay, I've done that. You can see now I've cut up right very close to that mark, maybe not quite on top of it. You can always cut more if need be. But I think we're gonna, yeah, probably needs a milli-smidge more. And the mark was in the right place. Boy, that's not much. I'll just give it a bit of a sand. Okay, that is really good. Okay, so I'll cut these holes. I don't know if I have a hole saw that'll cut that size. I'll probably use the jigsaw to cut the holes. Well, we've got our front bottom panel cut out, so that'll go in there like that. And we've also cut out the little bit to go into here. So this one we will epoxy that in place, and we will make sure it's straight coming across here. So it's going to fit in perfectly. And I'll just use the paper clips on that, and then I'll push it down to get it in place. So we're putting a bit on the ends here. Okay, get these guys on. Okay, now I just adjust these to suit. Okay. And now I just work the epoxy around to the places where we want it. I'm cutting out the pieces for the side of the fuselage. What's going to go over here. And as I do that, it's going to have two thicknesses to get the thickness that I need there. And so what I'm going to do is going to be kind of like plywood. So this one came from here. The grain is going parallel to this bottom edge here. So then I've taken it and I've flipped it. Well, I guess I've left it the same. But I've done it, put it up here on an angle where now the grain is going this way to where we got a cross hatch between the two grains. And you know, it could be perpendicular, it could be something else, but anyway, the way I've got it set up here is it's going to be just slightly crossed, but that's still going to add a lot to the strength, and it does maintain greater longitudinal strength that way, which may or may not be a particular issue. So anyway, having it traced out, I'm going to cut it out. As I do a trial fit here, I'm thinking about how it's going to follow the contour, and I think it's straight. It's just this outside piece is wanting to come out a bit. I think we'll glue the two pieces together first, and then we'll put them up there. Okay, and I could use epoxy if I wanted a super strong sort of join, but that's going to add more weight. So I think I'm going to use a medium CA, stick them together, and then I'll use a piece of baking paper over top of it, and then a block of wood to hold down on it. I guess that's going to work. Medium CA gives you just a little bit more time than the thin stuff. And actually, I want it on the bottom as well as on the top. Okay, so it's going together like that. Doesn't give me much time to do anything. Okay, that looks good. Okay. So I'm pressing in with my thumb against the bulkhead on my left, and on this little bit on the right I'm making sure that it's down and also even with the edge. Okay. So for the top edge here, it's going to be again about 135. And down to here, it's going to be 25, 35, and then 25. Okay, and then from there, it's coming forward 70. Okay, let's see, now it's not square. Okay, so I'm lining it up here, got it lined up there, and then I'm also lining it up down here, and then I'd say that's about 2.5 millimeter offset, measuring to the middle, 2.5 millimeters. So 135. So 135 is to here, so as I go out there, I'll then want to go 2.5 millimeters that way. So I come out here to there, and then measure 2.5 millimeters to there, and that's our line coming out to here. And that was 25 coming out, so I measure out 25 coming out, and then I'm going 70 that way. And it's going to be coming in a tiny bit. So we're just going a little bit back, and we'll be double checking these things as we go. 70 millimeters. Okay. And then for that one, if I measure perpendicular from here, it's about 20. So perpendicular from this point, it's out about 20. So now I get my 70 again. Come from here to there, 70. Okay, and then it should come from there up to here. Okay, that'll look roughly correct. I'd say so. We'll cut it out and we'll see whether we got it right. And voila! That's how it's done. Perfect. Okay, so now we want to position this back onto a piece of wood in a way in which it gives us the maximum difference as far as grain goes, while still not wasting too much wood. Okay, so I think positioning it like that, we have one grain going that way, the other grain going that way, so we got a bit of crisscross happening, and we don't waste too much of our balsa. And if you haven't figured it out yet, and you probably have, but the knife is going to, the blade is going to tend to want to follow the grain, so you have to think about how you're holding it to compensate for that. So in a situation like this, it's going to want to tend to come out this way, so I'll give it just a teensy tiny bit of end angle and start out very light. Okay, let's see how we did. Yeah, look pretty good. Now when I glue it together this time, I'm trying to be a little bit quicker. I'm just going to sand off a little bit off the bottom edge of this. Got a little something in there that's keeping it from going in all of the way. And just sand a little bit off of the edge there. As I probably fit this, I mean, it would be fine to just glue it in like that, but just a tiny bit proud out here. Proud being sticking out a very teensy tiny bit. Could be, I've got a little bit right here that I could relieve. And as far as this one, I'm wondering what might be, you know, it's not even a fingernail thickness. But as I press it in, I can see a little tiny dent there. So where that little tiny dent is, there must be something that is hitting on it right there. So just relieve that one little spot, just a teensy tiny bit. Okay. This, I don't know if I can do much about that or not. Just our corner here is just a little bit rounded. Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty good like that. Okay, we've epoxied our new bottom in. You may recall we decided not to put this one in, but instead to do that one. Part of the reason was that with this one it has a bulkhead going across the hole, which I hadn't thought about. But the second part of the reason was that I made this one to have the sides come up along the side of it. And then I ended up doing the sides just even with the bulkhead down there, so I needed to make it a little bit wider. So anyway, I'm very, very happy with that. The smaller holes allowed me to use a hole saw, so they're nice and precise and good looking. And has just a little bit of overhang here and there, which will allow us to just sand that and get that nice and even overall. It's even there, pretty even here. So just a little bit extra on the sides. We'll also have a little bit of filling to do in here on the sides. So all of that will kind of work together. So I think so that's all looking very, very good. So our side pieces came out looking pretty good. And yep, I'm happy with all of that. Well, we've got a little hole here that we need to fix in the side. And I guess we could come right back to here. So essentially what we'll do is we'll cut out a rectangular piece, and then we will make a rectangular piece that same size to go into the hole. And we're pretty close. Okay, if I make it even at front and back, then we're going to be a little bit proud here. We can add some filler and do some sanding in there. Well, I reckon it's about time that we cut an end to this particular video. Of course, to be continued. We've got a lot more happening on this plane, getting it fixed up, getting our hatch built up here at the front. And boy, when we get into that wing, that'll be interesting as well. So we'll just keep working through it little by little, showing you the detail as we go, and I trust it'll be helpful to you. Well, you enjoy your flying, have a great day, and this is RC Jim signing off.